I'm here. Tell me, are you one of those model citizens who never breaks the rules? I thought not. I know trouble when I see it. This way. Be quick. Don't want others getting suspicious. Thanks for stopping by.
Hello. So, first things first, I want you to know that I am aware that that's not how animated Boba Fett should be, but I want to make it clear that it was me talking rather than just overlaying the sound afterwards. And that was also the first time I was wearing the full costume, and I wasn't quite getting the vibe right. But anyway, moving on. As you probably guessed from this point, my Tamara Morrison impression probably wouldn't be that good. It would probably be generous to say it is changeable at best. So, I figured for my Boba Fett costume, I need to do a different system. I need to have it set up with sound files playing it out of an amp rather than me actually providing my voice. And this is it, and I wanted to show you how I did it. So here are the big boys of the setup. We've got a power pack. It has to be one, it doesn't have to be this big, but it does have to be one that will provide power at a low level. Some of them will automatically shut off if the power draw is quite low. This is an amp, so this is just a standard amp. I've used this before in a Stormtrooper costume, but in that case I can use my actual voice, so it's connected to a microphone, because I can sound like a Stormtrooper. I can't sound like Boba Fett. And this here is an Arduino with a wave shield, and this white thing around it, the case, is something I got off, I think, Thingiverse. I'll find the link and I'll put it in the description. And I just 3D printed that to go around it. The gist is that these live in the belt pouches. The cables for them, so this power pack goes in one, the Arduino and the amp go in the other. The cables come out the back through these little holes, and the one that brings them together loops back behind the belt and around to the other side. And there's also a cable that comes out of the Arduino, at the back here. This is soldered to a few of the button inputs and the neutral. Comes out to this USB, and that is USB 3. You need that for the right number of ports and connections to it. That goes through this 1.5 meter USB 3 cable down my arm, and that in turn connects to this, which is a set of buttons that I have on my wrist, like so. Now this setup is going to be very similar to some people, I expect, because I took this idea from Micom. I originally contacted them to try and get onto their waiting list, but unfortunately I got on their waiting list just in time for them to announced that they weren't doing it anymore, so I decided to do it all myself. Now, the one thing that I couldn't do myself at all was the voice. I just can't hit it right. It's not good. But I did originally contact, again, Micom to try and get a copy of their sound files, but they just disappeared off the face of the earth. So I ended up finding the original voice artist, and again, I'll link him down in the description. Really nice guy, and I got a copy of the sound files from him. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration of the different things that it's set up to do. Let me just quickly connect this up as if it were in there. And this. Oh. So, these different buttons can each be a different thing, and they're a different sort of category, and they don't give the same response each time. They also operate on long presses. So you can either press it and get one response, or you can press and hold it and get a different thing. So each one is a different set. So the first one, this is for either a simple greeting, so someone's waiting around to try and get it over to you. In which case you can say,
Boba Fett, at your service.
Or maybe,
step forward.
Now, it might be that they immediately say that they're, I love you, Boba Fett, you've always been my favourite character, or they're wearing a Boba Fett t-shirt or something like that. In which case, if you press and hold it, it's a reaction to that kind of reaction.
Your support is noted. I'll consider you an ally. for now.
Or maybe
Your loyalty is appreciated.
things like that. And that should hopefully show you a bit of the first indication of what we're going to be going through here. Now, people might ask you a question, and you're going to need to respond to that. So this next button is yes, in which case it could be
yes.
And there's not much variety you can have to that, right? One thing that you can do as well, I've also got it yes to a request. So, if someone, an official at an event says, can you guys move over to this section here, maybe, and you don't want to break character, then you could say,
as you wish,
for the long press. I'm not sure how much how much use that one's gonna get, because it's mostly covered by other areas. But anyway, now say someone said, "Oh, can we take a photo?" You always get people standing in weird places, like standing on the end of a group of people when really you want to have the punter right in the middle. So you can tell people where to go with,
step this way,
or maybe
over here.
That it should be useful just to get people where they're meant to be. And then once you're actually ready for them to take a photo, press and hold,
Proceed with image capture.
or possibly
Be quick. Don't want others getting suspicious.
I quite like that one. Anyway, this next button is no. So it's basically two versions of no. The press is just a simple no, in which case
No.
you can't get much more exciting than that. And then the other one is a more forceful one. So I figure this is the sort of difference between someone saying, "Oh, hey, have you been out here long?"
Negative.
Or, "Hey, Boba Fett, can I take your blaster?"
Absolutely not.
I figure you don't want to be quite so forceful. If someone says, "Have you been along?" you don't want to say, "Absolutely not." So that's why I've split them out. Now, the next one is really cool, and I really like this. This next button, it's two different questions. And I've kind of figured, what's the point of asking a question to people, members of the public, if you can't then react to what they're saying? So when you press that button, or hold it, it changes the function of the rest of this. It blanks out these buttons, so they don't work anymore. This button becomes an exit, effectively. Return the function of the rest of it to normal. And these three become a response to if the person says yes, if they say no, and if they give a sort of nondescript answer. So, for instance, if you ask them,
tell me, are you one of those model citizens who never breaks the rules?
They might say, "Oh, yeah, well, I'm very good. I wouldn't break the rules." In which case, you can say,
I thought so. You don't look like someone I'd have to drag away in handcuffs.
Pretty cool. And then you've got those other responses if they say something different. And I think that sort of interaction is really going to drive it and get people really excited. They're like, "Oh, I had an actual conversation with Boba Fett. Amazing." Now, if you press and hold this button, it's the same setup, but it's a slightly different question. In which case, I'm really looking forward to this, to use it with families. Say you get a kid come over and you can see that they're with their parents or something, and you can ask them,
tell me, if the bounty was big enough, would you turn them in?
Can you imagine the kid saying that? Can you imagine saying that to a kid and then them sort of turning to their parents? Anyway. Imagine that. They might say, yeah, probably. In which case you can give them a pretty cheeky.
That didn't seem like a very tough decision.
But the other responses are pretty cool as well. So if they say that they wouldn't, you can answer that one, which is, I'll ask again when there aren't so many witnesses around, that kind of thing. Now, this next button, it's more about a generic interaction. So you've got neutral and you've got also an ally interaction. So if you just press it, that's the ally interaction. So I figure that's maybe someone who's at an event and they've got a T-shirt of Boba Fett or a different bounty hunter, or like the Mythosaur logo, or they're costuming as a different bounty hunter, like the Mandalorian or Boosh or Bosk, something like that. In which case, you can say to them,
if you have any information that leads to a valuable fugitive, you'll be rewarded with 10% of whatever I tell you the reward is.
Or perhaps you could say,
there is loyalty in you. An admirable trait. Be sure it's not misplaced.
Quite fun, I think. Next one is a more neutral. So this might be someone who is perhaps wearing a Star Wars t-shirt. Something a bit generic, shows they're interested in the world itself, but perhaps there's no faction. There's no like whether they're an ally or an enemy. They're just like obviously into the world. In which case you could say something like,
Hold it right there. Haven't I seen you in carbonite before?
yeah, it's a bit cheeky, a bit neutral. Because I can imagine lots of Boba's friends have ended up in carbonite as well. Or maybe,
This job just got interesting.
see, quite a nice sort of interaction. I figure people might like to, again, have that sort of interaction with a character. Especially, an iconic specific character rather than just the things I can say as a stormtrooper. Now, the next one, this is an enemy interaction. So this is where someone is dressed up as Princess Leia, or they've got a t-shirt on that's got the Rebel Starbird on, or something like that. Something who would generally be an enemy to Boba Fett. In which case...
You seem like the rebellious type. I find that very profitable.
Or an alternative, perhaps?
Just a moment. You look familiar.
Something like that. Again, that's just a bit sort of, whoa. I think that would be a good thing. Perhaps that might tie in quite nicely with asking a question, like saying, are you one of those model citizens who never breaks the rules? It's a good start. Pressing and holding is a very specific sort of interaction that I've got down as an interaction with the Jedi. In which case...
I've got a bone to pick with you, Jedi.
I actually don't have many other voices for that one, so there's only one other item for it.
Jedi. I don't do business with Jedi. They don't need my help, and I don't need the trouble.
Pretty fun. But, outside of a Comic-Con or something, not likely to come up much. Now, someone's come over, you've had a bit of interaction with them, they've taken a photo, happy days. You need to not just, be silent as they wander off. Or you can if you fancy the menacing air. But if you want to say something, that's where this button comes in. So you can go for it. It's just a simple press of...
You are free to go. For now.
Or perhaps...
On your way.
Some of them are a bit more dismissive than others. Anyway, there's that. And now there's one other feature. This is something that I've done myself. It wasn't part of Mycon's features. It's one that I thought, this is something that's necessary. Because what if you press one of these? For example...
By the looks of you, it seems like you're interested in joining the guild.
But the thing is, imagine then you say that to someone and something else happens, or they were distracted by their parents or a friend that they were there with, and they didn't quite catch it, and they say, oh, sorry, what was that? You can't just press that button again because it's going to be something slightly different. Like, not massive difference, but it's not going to be exactly the same thing. So, for instance, if we press it...
If you have any information that leads to a valuable fugitive, you'll be rewarded with 10% of whatever I tell you the reward is.
That's not helpful. So, I've set this one to press and hold so that it is a repeat of whatever last happened. So, in this case, if I press and hold it...
If you have any information that leads to a valuable fugitive, you'll be rewarded with 10% of whatever I tell you the reward is.
Ah, so there you go. That is the setup, the physical setup. Yeah, I am very pleased with this. I'm also going to show you the coding, so the code that I've put onto the Arduino, because I don't know about you, I was very new to this, so I needed to spend a lot of time figuring it out. And it took me a while. I got there. It's not the prettiest code ever, I'm sure, but it gets the job done, which is all I really needed. So without further ado, let's switch over to the computer. I just wanted to show you my starting point, so the baseline I began with, modifications I did to it, and the way I've got things set up to get to actually work with the system. For starters, where we started with, as you see here, I simply googled Arduino Wave Shield, and going on here, the second result here is this Adafruit Learning System Overview Wave Shield. Click on that, and down the left under Use It, expand that out, and go to Examples. And down here, the example I use as the sort of original bit was this one. Play the file once, all the way through, and only once. By the way, this also has a great layout for how to actually put the piece together, because you get it as a kit. It will involve soldering. If you, like me, haven't done any soldering in the last 20 years, chances are you're going to do something a bit crap. So check your solders, Google what a good solder looks like, because chances are it won't work initially, and you'll sort of do a bit of research, try and figure it out, and you'll find out, oh, actually my solders are rubbish. Go back, fix them, works great. So yeah, anyway, just to go back to the examples, play the wave file once, all the way through, and only once. If you click that, it gives you this. And that is what I used as my baseline for it. And literally you can just copy that into your editor of choice. You'll probably spend a fair amount of your time editing using the Arduino IDE. That's going to be in here. It's really useful because if you plug the Arduino in, you get the output from it in this serial monitor down here, so you can see what it's doing. You can plug stuff in and you can see what it's actually trying to do, make sure your code's running how you expect it to, and debug. However, for this example, I'm going to instead use Notepad++. That way I can show you the original, which is over on the left, and my version, which is over on the right. If you're not familiar with Notepad++, all the lines that are white have not been changed, all the lines that are green on the right have been added, all the lines that are yellow on both sides have been modified but are otherwise recognisably similar, and any lines that are red on the left have been removed. So, without any further ado, let's have a look at the code. So these bits are includes, so those are modules that are included. I have included easy button, but that was quite early on. I think actually I didn't use that in the end, but I've just left it in because it runs. To anyone who knows Arduino code inside out, I'm sorry. I've got this to a point where it works. This was my first project using Arduino, and yeah, I got it to a point where it works. I'm absolutely certain that there are much better, more efficient ways of doing this, but this is the version that I've managed to get to work. But yes, so that don't think it's being used. This, however, definitely is. This is a definition at the start to say that long press time is 1000. This is later used to compare against milliseconds. So this is saying that 1000 milliseconds, or 1 second, is how long you need to press down the button before it registers as a long press. I.e., if you press and release within 1 second, it will be just a normal press. If you press and hold it for a second, it will be a press and hold. These bits are the same, so that is just setting up a few objects and variables that I use later on. No change. These are setting some maximums. Now again, I'm sure I could have gone through the files to get this, but you see how I've got click 1 max because I've got 7 different phrases for the basic greeting. I've got hold 1 max equals 6 because I've got 6 files that are there if you press and hold button 1. If you just go to the files, this is a copy of what I've got on the SD card that's connected into my Arduino for it. You see I've got this 1 click 0 1, so 1 button 1 click 0 1 0 2 3 4 5 6 7, and that matches click 1 max. Yeah, wrong one. Hold 1 click 0 1 2 3 4 5 6, again that matches the int hold 1 max equals 6, and that's all the same. The main difference, the only bit that's out of this pattern is for 5. That's the pair of questions. So for you've got 5 click 0 1, that's just asking the question, and then you've got 5 click Y for yes, N for no, and M for maybe, the indistinct one. And that matches in here. So as you see, for the questions about model citizen and asking about if their bounty was high enough, would you turn them in? These aren't actually set. As you see, these double slashes at the start are comments, so I've actually commented those out because I just have them there in the code as reference. That's not even, I think since they're comments, they're not even part of the compilation, so when it compiles the code and sends it to the Arduino, I don't think those are actually in there. So anyway, that carries on for the rest of the files. Obviously, there is no hold 8 max because that is just repeating the last file played. This I also don't think I used because I was having a lot of trouble trying to get that replay the last thing played to work, and that was one idea I had using this last played character, but I don't think I actually ended up using that. Then there are some extra variables to help things along later. So there is one called mode, 0 for just normal operation, 1 is for that question 1, and 2 is for the question 2. That's how I've managed to get it so that the buttons do multiple things if it's in that operation, that mode from the different questions. Other than that, all the buttons that aren't 5 or hold 8, you initialize this current one that is being played, or the next one really, to 1, because you want, for each of them, you want to start with 1 click 01, or 1 holder 1, etc. Now this is buttons, so these are the slots, the ports in the Arduino that are connected to the actual physical buttons. So as you see, it's already set up there with 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 and 19, that's what we had in the example, but I needed 2 more, and in this case I used 0 and 7. You can, by the way, you may notice that there's a difference between digital and analog slots on the buttons. That doesn't matter for this purpose. You can use digital or analog. It's fine. It all works fine. As you see, because those are, I can't remember which round it is now. Sorry, digital or analog, and these are the other one. I think these are all digital, and the ones I added were analog. Now these are the next one. The next change. These. So the original just had pressed, just pressed, and I think just released. And this is, each of these is an array, the size of num buttons, which is size of this array here. So i.e., however many buttons, and originally the original example was only set up for 6, but however many that there are of those gets put into this variable, num buttons, and then this creates another set of variables that are the length of however many buttons you've got. And then you can put, there'll be a value in here for each one of the buttons. Now I needed to add in a bit more, because I need to also register if a button has been long pressed, and then hand that out so that it can do stuff. I also do need the just released, just pressed, and pressed. Now, the next bit, this is all sort of the basic setup. This is how how it interacts with the physical bit, so we don't need to make much of no changes here. This declares a couple of functions, so that's just like returning the amount of free memory in it. That is reporting errors in the SD card. This is the setup function, so this is what run at the start of booting the thing up. Again, as you see, with no changes. I put an extra line break in there. Must have been when I was debugging stuff. I put an extra line in that to test something out. Another line break there. I must have been wanting to check something. Now there's this signal. Now I have to admit, I don't know exactly what this is. I think it's something along the lines of every time it runs through a CPU cycle or something like that, run the function check switches, which is what we have just next. And this, again, this is where we start getting some differences again. So as you see, originally it had some bytes in it for previous state and current state. I also needed to declare 2 new ones of pressed time and suppress release. And again, those are arrays, an array of bytes or an array of long numbers. And the length of it is however many buttons you've got. Something to remember as well, in Arduino, this array, and the size of an array, starts counting from 0, which is going to be a bit of a confusion through the rest of this, because button 1 actually amounts to when num buttons equals 0. It's just how things are. So, yes, as you see here, it's got an index, and this for loop, first up, for index equals 0, so sets the value of index to 0, while index is less than the value of num-buttons, do the following, and then increment index by 1. And then loop back round again, until you reach that value. Now originally, this part, it didn't care about this, so if you... I was finding that when if I pressed the button, it would, and then press another button while the first one was still playing, it would then wait until the first one was finished and would play the next one. I want it to just not bother recording things while I'm not bother recording any changes while something's playing. I don't want to queue things up like that. If I need to, I'll press it, wait for it to finish, and press the next one. So in this case, I wanted to suppress that. So instead, while the wave object, and we'll see that later, but if the wave object is playing, and then that exclamation mark at the start means not, so if the wave object is not playing, then do this, and get the current state, or rather set the current state to a digital read of the buttons from whatever index we're currently working on, i.e. for the first loop around this, for button 0, so back in the declaration of it back here, so number 0, or button 0 for this is 14, and that'll depend where you've soldered stuff in. Yeah, 4, 0. Yeah, so for looping for 0, button 0, read button 0, and put the value into the current state for 0. I know that sounds complicated, but bear with. That means that rather than having to read it every single time through the rest of this, it's just used for the once, and then that bit's called later. So then this bit goes through, so if the current state is the same as the previous state, if the pressed index is now, if it's now low, i.e. it's just been pressed, and this is where you start to deviate, originally it just says just sets the value of just pressed for this index to 1. I also need to record exactly when that happens. So you set it to the value of millis, brackets. That is the number of milliseconds since the Arduino was turned on. So that records when the button's pressed, meaning that you can wait until the number of seconds you want to wait for it to register a long press, and then it can play. We'll see that in a second. So if it's, you can set those. Else if, so i.e., that's outside of this if section here. So if it has not just been pressed, like if it's not immediately, if this isn't it being pressed, have a look. If press time plus long press time, i.e. the time that it was pressed, is at plus 1000, as is currently set, is less than the current time, and press time is not equal to 0, because that tripped me up, then set long pressed to 1 for this index, and also set suppress release, because you don't want to press the button, have it play button 1, or button hold, and then you release it, and it's like, and now I'm going to do button 1, click. No, you want to suppress that until it's all complete. And also set that, and then also then reset that press time for this index back to 0. Right, so else if the button has just been released, first up you want to make sure is suppressed index set to 1. If it is, that means that it has also just finished playing the press and hold for it, and therefore we don't actually want it to do it. So instead, if that's the case, then just do this part, just change suppress release to 0. If it has not been suppressed, i.e. if that is already 0, then set just released, and that is dealt with later on. So then that sort of return back to the rest of the application, this button has just been released, therefore you need to do the click reaction to it. And of course, if it has just been released, you can set press time to 0. It should also have been set here, but belt and braces, I figure better to have it declared to 0 twice rather than not at all. These were things that I put in during debugging. No real need to worry about those. That was just this took a lot of debugging the whole process, so you'll see quite a few of these serial print lines, and those are things that would turn up in this section here, if you had an Arduino plugged in, you'd be able to see, that's why it's not working. So then on to this void loop. Now this is the function that basically runs constantly. Once it's turned on, it'll run through void setup, and then it will just go through void loop. And as soon as it reaches the end of void loop, it goes back to the start again, and carries on back to the start. Now here, originally it used byte. I'm not quite sure why. I can't remember. I don't remember seeing it anywhere in it actually. Oh, I think it. I don't know. On instead, I need to declare buffer because that ties into replaying things. That was the way I got it to work in the end. So previously it was if just pressed, because the original code had it set so that when you press a button, it would immediately start playing. I instead want, if you're just doing a click, I want it to register on one release rather than on press. So instead of this is set here as saying if just pressed index 0, so i.e. if the button 1 has just been pressed, and effectively that's the end of the if statement. Effectively that means if it is equal to 1, but that's just a shorter way of putting it. So if that has just been pressed, then set it to 0, and the example was like a random file, play complete do, as in do, re, mi, etc. What I need to do is a bit more complicated than that, but a lot of this is actually printing out to the serial. So let's see. If just released, again that's a little difference, is 0, or rather is not. If just released is equal to 1, then set it to 0. If mode is equal to 0, so the overall status is just the normal operation, i.e. all the buttons and all the button and holds, then these are just like printing out debugging so I could understand what was going on. Now the sprintf function is quite clever. Sprintf takes the first argument, which is a variable, and it will insert into that variable the next argument. So in this case, it is going to put in 1c0 something .wav, and that %d it will replace with whatever the value is of the third argument. In this case, click 1 current. So earlier on we initialized click 1 current and set it to 1. So the first time button 1 is clicked and released, it'll get to this sprintf, and the value of click 1 current will be simply 1. So buffer will be given the value of 1c01.wav. Again, serial print to just output it into the serial console, and then it chucks it into this play complete function, which is how it plays the file. And we'll see a bit of that later on. If and then it goes on to the housekeeping. So if the current value of click 1 current is equal to the value of click 1 max, then reset it to 0, i.e. we have pressed this 7 times, we don't have any more files after that, reset it back to the start. If it is not equal to it, else, then set click 1 current equal to click 1 current plus 1. I think I could just say click 1 current plus plus, but again, I'm sure that's a much more efficient way of doing it, but this is the version I was able to get. You know, this is what this was what started working first, so that's what we have. And then again, a little bit of debugging. This is very similar, except instead of it being just released, it is long pressed. I've got a little log there so I can understand what was going on. Set long pressed equal to 0. If mode equal to 0, then, and the rest of this is all the same, except instead of it being click 1 max, it is hold 1 max. Instead of it being click 1 current, it is hold 1 current. Instead of passing in 1c0 whatever, it is 1h0 whatever. And that's repeated mostly. For the buttons 2, 4 and 6, those are the ones that corresponds to yes, no and maybe, or yes, no and nondescript response for the questions. So that has a slightly different function. You see that if mode is equal to 1, then for first up, chuck that value into the buffer and play 5 click y.wav as a file, because it's not variable. That's always going to be the same response. And also, of course, set the mode to 0. And then something very similar for mode 2, except it's 5 hold y.wav. And again, set the mode to 0. Else, that's exactly the same. Here it's very similar for the others. Notice, by the way, for the long pressed and the odd button, so 1, 3, 5 and 7, it doesn't have anything else. So it doesn't have an if mode equals 0 else. It is just if mode equals 0. It's normal operation, do this, otherwise don't. So that's why buttons 1, 3, 5, and 1, 3, 5 and 7, or the long presses of all of them doesn't do, long presses of all of them doesn't do anything in that mode. Just go down, and again, remember, it's confusing, I know, but remember that the indexes here are 1 less than the actual button number. If you go down, we should find long press 3. Here we go. So, if just released 4, this is a bit simpler. If mode is equal to 0, again, there's nothing else for it to do. If it's visit the other mode, just chuck 5click01.wav into the buffer, play it, and then set mode equal 1. And it's very similar if you press and hold button 5, mode equal 2. And then the rest of that is all very much the same sort of pattern. Doopy doopy doo, we all just go down right to the end. Now, this is the hardest bit for me as well. Long pressing the final button, button 8. The idea is we want to repeat the last item played regardless of what it was. So, like all the others, set the value of it to 0 so it doesn't continually try and replay this. And this bit is now so simple, but I must have had so many troubles earlier on, but you just have to pass what's in the buffer. Which has been declared all the way through. That's why we were populating the value of buffer for this sprintf rather than just passing like this value straight into play complete. Chuck it into buffer, and it is picked up here, and it's able to play it. And then it gets to the end of that, and then once it's finished that, it will loop back to the start of the void loop and play it again, or run through it again. Now, the other bits, I do still have some more changes I need to do. This is the play complete, so this is the function that is being called each time that it needs to do something. And this acts a bit like a wrapper as well to the actual function that does play the file, just to sort of a few extra bits of help. So first up, so this is the void play file, so it plays the file. While the file is playing, it deliberately has nothing in there because while it's playing, do nothing. Note that things are still being recorded because it's you've still got that earlier on, where was it? This signal. So it's still checking switches, which is why I had to declare a few things in here I had to get rid of that if wave isn't playing around this, because it's still checking switches. It's just not running through void loop anymore because it hits this play complete, and during play complete, it gets to this while wave is playing, and then it just stops. But it'll still then register any changes that happened in the meantime. So now it's then once that finishes, this was something I was trying to get work. I'm pretty sure, in fact, since that's commented out, that isn't being used, so you can ignore that part. That was something I was trying to get a different method of getting that buffer process to work. And so I had this variable called last play, but I couldn't pass it back in. Don't worry. I do also have this f.close. Now, that was something I found. I was having problems when I would get it to replay a file because everything was being passed through all right. It was recognising that the file name was being passed through. I could see that, but it still wasn't playing the file. And I found out that it must have been keeping the file open. So essentially, I'm putting this in here to force it to close the file after it's finished playing it. So then this is, so it does this play file. Like I said, this is acting a bit like a wrapper to the actual bit that plays it. Play file takes characters in. Now originally, what it would do is, if something is already playing, stop it, which I didn't want to do. I don't want to like press button 1 and then accidentally press button 2 and have it stop playing. Absolutely not what I wanted to do. So I got rid of that bit. Simply. It wasn't needed for my purpose. Obviously, you can keep it if you wish. Didn't work for me. Now this, yeah, if wave is playing, I've used that slightly. Oh, you know, if wave create, this is sometimes this doesn't quite work when it's picking things up. That if wave creates is actually now down here. I have this extra bit here saying if wave is playing, look in the root directory, open the file. So if the file is open, I don't think this is really necessary, this particular part, because it's, this was from debugging, but because I wanted to find, could not open the file. But that's, as it is, that's just an extra bit of logging if necessary, if it goes wrong as well. And then, yeah, so then this, if wave creates, is pulled in. If it is unable to, so you see there's that exclamation mark at the start, so if it is unable to create a wave from the input file, right, because it opens the file here, yeah, then, yeah, if it's unable to, then return the file, well, return this out of this and say not a valid WAV. Otherwise, i.e. if it is able to create a wave object, then put string playing. So that records a log and then play it. And that's basically it. One other thing, I just remembered in the guide here, there are other bits to this, so there are complexities. So you need to make sure that the SD card is formatted correctly. You need to make sure that the files are converted. So I did it through Audacity. Through just sheer audacity. But that guide works, and it worked for mine. It's a bit of a pain in the arse for doing so many files, but it works. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know. I may not be able to reply very quickly, but I will get back to you. Yeah. It has been a blast. I am looking forward to seeing people out at conventions and saying hi and possibly arresting you in the name of my bounty. So it's been fun. Cheerio, and have a good time. Happy hunting, and I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold. Thanks.